Hello and welcome to the Sacral Circle, where we are healing sexual trauma collectively and lovingly. I'm your host, Janie Terrazas, and I'll be interviewing women from all walks of life who have had to face a sexual tragedy or abuse in one form or another and triumphed over their adversity. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, The Sacral Circle. Just visit The Sacred Stories on iTunes. Visit JanieTerrazas.com for more information on my coaching and healing services. I want to thank our beautiful listeners for joining us today on the Sacral Circle, the self-love haven where we leave judgment at the door. And today I'm grateful to introduce to you Rebecca L. Mahan. She is a published author, an award-winning radio show host and producer. She is the media director for the Liberty Beacon Project and host of TLBTV's Rebecca Sounds Reveille. She's a United States Marine Corps veteran and a retired police officer of over 10 years. Rebecca also has a bachelor's degree in church ministry and occupational studies, vocational arts, as well as a master's degree in biblical studies. She is a certified mediator and event planner, and to reach her, you can go to voteprogram.org. That's VOTE program.org. It's an acronym for Victims Overcoming Traumatic Events. Rebecca, thank you so much for being with us today. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for being with us. And you have a very amazing life because you, like a lot of us that are on the program and that I have on the show here, is that you really use your life to serve others. And you have been through quite a lot your own self, and instead of becoming a victim, you've become a victor. And the women that I have on my show have moved past their own trauma and are thriving in life. And I believe what takes us from survivor to thriver is when we use our testimony and our life to help others through their pain. So thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing. And I'm just really excited to give you an opportunity to share your story. So how did you get into this work, and what was sort of the inspiration behind it all? Because I know you've dealt with some pretty tough stuff yourself.
Absolutely. I have dealt with a lot of very difficult situations, and how I got into it is getting to a point, and this is where I started really helping others, is I got to a position in my life where I had had a very unhealthy relationship, and I realized that the only person to make any of my relationships healthier, including the one with myself, was to take a look at what was going on with me and how to address those things and move beyond them. And so I spent a lot of time in research and self-help and talking to, I did go to a therapist for a little while, and I spent a lot of time in church and biblically learning and so on and so forth. But I got to a position where I had really understood a lot and was being able to address a lot of things, though I didn't know at that time that I had not addressed all of them. But I had got to a point where I thought I was very, very healthy and could have a healthy relationship with others. And so at one point I ended up where I had been laid off from my job, and so I put myself through the police academy, and I was sitting in a domestic violence class. And as the instructor was giving us the lesson, I had this light bulb go off on how I could address domestic violence, and I could help other people move beyond an unhealthy relationship. And so I had this idea within me for a while, and it wasn't until later, after I had graduated the police academy, I started working as a correctional officer, and it was a pre-release coordinator for a little while, where I was helping women. I worked at a women's prison, helping women in a very intense 30-day program to address behaviors that were causing them to go back to prison or continue in unhealthy relationships. And so after that, and then going through the hiring process to get hired with the Sutter County Sheriff's Department, I ended up getting on with them. And a little while later, we were asked to, each deputy was to then come up with a community-oriented policing project. And I said, I know what my project is going to be. I wonder if they'll let me do it. So I prepared a presentation for them, and I went to my sergeant, and he said, well, you're going to have to talk to the captain. So I did, and they said, well, we'll let you try your program out for about a year, and we'll see how it goes. And I said, okay. And so that was the implementation of the VOTE program, Victims Overcoming Traumatic Events. And the first year, the statistics showed that 97% of the households, after having been in that program, we did not go back. Law enforcement did not go back to those homes, and it was tracked for another 7 years, and 95% of the homes law enforcement didn't go back to. So it was a huge success, and I was really helping people overcome different types of trauma. And because of being on the being a deputy at the Sheriff's Department, I was also learning about other traumas and finding that the same solutions and techniques and tools and resources that I was able to provide people to move beyond domestic violence applied to a number of other traumas, including sexual trauma. And so that's where it all began.
Love it. When you said you got the light bulb moment, I think a lot of us have those types of moments, but not everybody always listens and sort of follows through with action. And you did. And what an amazing result to have when you have data like that you can go back to and show this program was working. But I am curious, you said there was a 30-day, what was it?
Yeah.
Was it a combination of body work and talk? Because that's not a very long period of time to make such a huge impact. So I'm just curious what that looked like.
In actuality, 30 days, if you're doing that for 8 hours a day, it really is.
I didn't know that. Wow.
It is grueling because in the class you're taught about boundaries and facing triggers and alcoholism and drugs and why you're turning to those things. Why are you making those decisions? And really identifying what is going on internally. And it's a lot of work to be committed to saying, I know I have a situation that has caused me to think a certain way, to be in a certain box mentally, which is far worse of a prison to be in than a physical one. And then to expose all of those to ourselves and then find coping mechanisms to get through that healing process. So while 30 days doesn't sound like a long time, 30 days does make a habit, right? We do know that. And if you're talking about focusing 8 hours to that and then going back and doing homework, that's a lot of work.
Yes, and
most of us don't have time for that.
Yes, most of us don't have time for that. But in these women's cases, it looks like the majority of them probably didn't have regular jobs, and I think some of this probably was also used in the prison system. So they had the ability to get 8 hours a day for 30 days and devote that extra time outside of the classes or courses or therapy to do the homework assignments. I like to call it soul work, and all of that, everything you described. First of all, you said exposing. It's really exposing ourselves, right, to our wounds, our shadows, the dark side inside of us that's pained, and it's getting really raw and real with yourself, and it takes so much bravery and so much courage to do that. And I think it's really great that you were able to offer that hand, because I feel like for those of us that are helping people through their trauma, we're really just like gently, compassionately, lovingly holding their hand and creating space for them to feel okay to go into those really raw, real places. And
Very
you
true.
mentioned, right, and all of this to me it's all self-love, because I'm all about the self-love movement, and I believe that to self-love has everything to do with know thyself. And you're talking about identifying what's really going on internally. And it's true, because for me, when I was going through my healing, and I know you were saying before we started recording, you're also still kind of going through some therapy for some stuff, which we can touch on here in a little bit. But it is learning how to use love and light and compassion and mercy to like have conversations with that pain, if that makes any sense.
Very
it's
true.
Like learning, right? It's like how, because we're really needing to learn how to become our own best friend, our own best caretaker, our own little guru, our own healer, our own savior, so to speak. We need others to assist us, but at the end of the day, the work always comes back down to how bad do you want to free yourself? And you said this, right? And this mental box, you said, is like a prison. And I really like that analogy, because we have caged parts of ourselves within our own self. I just really love a lot of the things that you said. I love that you're touching on boundaries. That's so huge. Like, what would you say, if you could describe it in words, the change that you see in these people after this like 30-day time frame?
Well, while working at the prison, the 30 days, I did not get to see them. This was the 30 days prior to them being released and going back into what they call society, right? Back into whatever culture that they originally came from. And I did receive letters from those inmates who had been released and found that the tools that was given in the class was something that made a significant difference in their lives. Through the VOTE program, having worked that not only with the sheriff's department, but later when I became a police officer down in the San Diego area, San Diego County, and following it for the length of time that I did, the changes are absolutely amazing, because you will find a person who has gone from being a recluse or allowing others to kind of walk all over them because they did not feel confident enough to speak up on their own behalf, or to say no, or to erect boundaries for healthy relationships, which permeates every other relationship you have, because one relationship affects them all. And even though people will say, oh, well, I can keep home life and work life, or home life and school life separate, we really can't, because we're interacting and we respond patternistically in a certain way to how people speak to us, how behaviors and micro expressions are conveyed to us and the perception we have on them. And when we're in a state of unhealthiness and we're not able to really see those things because we have a tunnel vision and we're responding in a patternistic way, it's very, very difficult. But once we start going through our journey of being able to identify the things that are kind of bumps in the road, then that tunnel vision expands and we're able to start seeing things from a different perspective, because it's a larger perspective. And this happens kind of like a ripple effect in our tunnel moving larger and larger and larger. And we're implementing things to allow ourselves to move beyond. And the transformation is absolutely amazing. I've heard other people use the analogy of, a caterpillar going into a cocoon to become a butterfly. And it's much like that, because we have to be in that cocoon for a little while. But everything that is important to us becoming that butterfly and really being able to fly is what we do inside of that.
Yes, I totally agree. Oh, I love talking to you so much. It's just hearing you talk, because just talking about the patterns, right, and the tunnel vision that we get into. And you're right, the cocoon is the most crucial part of our metamorphosis. And we go through many metamorphoses throughout life.
Yes.
And this incubation, this hibernation, it's a really critical time. And it's also a time of us shedding the old. And sometimes when we're shedding the old, we are like, well, who am I without this pain? Who am I without these stories? Again, when you have somebody by your side that's encouraging and supporting you and saying, listen, like, I know you don't know what that's going to look like, but it's going to feel and look a lot better than what it was before. And even from the caterpillar butterfly analogy, as a caterpillar, our perspective, it's like we're kind of just inching around from the ground. And so what can a caterpillar see versus the perspective of the eye of the butterfly? And so you're right. As you heal, this has happened to me. It happens to everybody that goes through their healing journey. Your perspective expands, like Rebecca was saying. And for me, it's so much higher. It's so much vast. It's vaster. I don't even know if that's a word. It's wider, higher, and deeper. I want to go as deep as I can with myself. I want to have I call it the dragonfly eye, I believe. That's I think it's the only insect that can see 360 degrees around. And so I always want to be able to see my life and the good and the bad, right? There's challenges, my pain, especially my past pain. I want to see it with a soul eye that can go 360 degrees. So that way I have a better chance at moving beyond. I like when you said that, because we really have the capabilities to move beyond the old story, move beyond the trauma and the pain, and just hold with us the wisdom. Tell us a little bit about, you were talking about different types of trauma, and you've seen a lot, and I'd like, in your own words, right, because we're all dealing with grief in different ways, but what are some of the different kinds of trauma that people sometimes don't even realize are inside of them? I feel like all of us have a varying degree of PTSD. People think PTSD is just rape victims and soldiers, and it's like, no, I think if we grew up in a home where there was a lot of disturbance, let's say, a lot of fighting or abuse or neglect, or that really does create a fracture, I feel like, within us, especially when it comes to self-worth.
Most definitely it does. And post-traumatic stress disorder, which is PTSD, and you're right, it is assumed that it is isolated to soldiers and those of sexual trauma, and it is not. PTSD is just that, post, meaning afterwards, traumatic, any type of trauma. Stress is what you're going through, and a disorder meaning you have not been able to move through that. And so there's a number of different traumas that we all have, and the symptoms of those traumas evolve in a lot of different ways. They are all internal, they're all within the brain, but they're mental, it can be physical, emotional. We're all connected in one body. All of this is connected. Our mental, emotional, and physical states, this is our body. So everything is connected, and we respond to it like that. So it ends up surfacing as depression, anxiety, panic attacks. It can be self-inflicted harm. It can be an eating disorder. And those are all traumas in addition to the trauma that we first had, right? So it's really interesting and how intricate all of this is. But before I say anything further, I want to say that no matter where you're at in your journey, another event can happen. And because you have gotten so far, you may not end up realizing that that event has now created another trauma within you that needs to be dealt with. And while it may remain hidden for a while, it will eventually surface.
Yes,
so it doesn't really matter
right.
because this is life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're human.
Yep.
And so we look at experts going, well, they have got this behind them, they have done that with their life, so on and so forth. And so they're immune now to anything, and that is not the case. We all, no matter where we're at in our life's journey, will experience different traumas along the way, and they may be dealt with right then, but they can also stay hidden.
When you start going through this self journey, like this like personal growth and healing journey, you start to discover all the different ways it's actually impacting your personality. And you're like, wow, and your mind starts to get blown. You were talking about before, it sounds like you had been in an abusive relationship. Was that the kind of abuse that you were in?
My relationship was very unhealthy, and it wasn't the first one, but the one that really was so unhealthy, where it was so destructive, I knew that something had to change. And the only person that you can change is you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's really frustrating, I'm not going to lie.
Oh, we a lot of times, think that, well, if I do this, that other particular behavior that the other person is doing will change. Mm-hmm. But that's not necessarily the case, and that's more of a controlling nature. Mm-hmm. It's sort of a manipulation. True. So instead of looking at changing someone else's behavior, let's look at what do I need to do within my psyche and within my behavior to become healthy, because the other person's response is going to automatically change whether they want it to or not.
Mm-hmm. I know. It's like that. There's this really cool equation. I forget his name off the top of my head, the man that wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul. He has an equation called E plus R equals O. So E is the event, R is your response to the event, equals the outcome. And
right.
if we start to change our response to whatever the event may be and are consistent, the other person at some point will shift in some way or another.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It may not be the response that we think is going to happen, but there will be a different response. Really what happens is whatever situation that we're in, everything boils down to two emotions. One is either love or the other is fear. And so if we are staying in an unhealthy relationship, that's all negative, which equates to fear. So there's really a fear issue going on if someone is staying in a relationship that isn't.
I agree.
Yeah.
That's not healthy for them. Yeah, because we can feel when we're in a partnership that's like mentally, emotionally, physically, and or spiritually like debilitating to us. And we do have to and when we allow that, because at some point it is an allowance of it. That's when we have to really take a harder look at our own selves and realize we have some self-love work to do.
Most definitely. And the number one thing that someone can do to get started in making progress, no matter where they're at, is beginning to identify what negative emotion they have when any event happens, whether it's a conversation or something major. And identify that negative feeling internally, the negative self-talk, and ask ourselves, what is it that I fear? And that is really difficult because most of us don't want to say we're scared of anything. Mm-hmm. But truly identifying what fear it is the number one way to move forward. Because once we've identified a fear, we can then figure out what do I need to do, or what tools or resources do I need to move beyond that. And that's where change begins.
I feel like for all of us that are going through healing, a lot of the work is done, right, like on our own, but you can't get through it by yourself. You just can't. There's something that's really beautiful about this process where it's like designed for us to be able to extend a hand out and say, hey, like, I need you to help me. I need you to help me with
I agree. And what's really interesting about that is that that's all relationship-oriented, right? So, one, we're in a tunnel internally. We're in this prison, so we really can't get a different perspective because we're in it. So when we're talking to somebody else, not only are they listening, but then they're providing feedback or techniques, tips, tools, whatever. And that allows our perception to get a little bit bigger. But developing a relationship where you're able to discuss with somebody what's happening with you, excuse me, also reinforces safety and trust.
Yes, it's true. Because that is probably one of the hardest things for people. I mean, I believe one of the reasons it's very difficult for people to open up is because they are worried they're going to be judged, or they're worried they're going to sound silly, or they're going to be rejected, or they're not going to be liked, or whatever it is. And it really comes down to trusting your own self to be able to put your words to your thoughts and express them, and then to be able to do that with a person that's going to hold a safe space for you. And everybody needs at least one person like that in their life to be able to establish the core belief in that, in your own self, and then that with another human being. and everybody needs at least one person to be able, I call it like dumping our dumpster, but not onto somebody who's going to like disempower you and feed into the victim. We need to be able to speak to somebody who can be a pillar of strength and stand in stand in truth and stand in light and see you in that light while you are maybe seeing yourself or feeling yourself in a different way. This is all so crucial to like the overall holistic way of being able to really go back into, like we were saying before, take sovereignty of your mind, body, heart, and soul, and really like step into life where you're really living to the optimal level that you could possibly live, because you know you deserve it and you know that you can. And that's what you're helping people do, and I really admire you for that. And also too, like, congratulations on just how far you've come along your own journey in your healing. I know that you had mentioned you and I this past year, I've really been dealing with a lot of my sex trauma, and that was something that you're kind of working through too. And it sounds like for you, therapy, like a therapist, is what's helping you get through that, correct?
Well, it is, and it's something that I chose not to deal with subconsciously for many, many years.
Me too. I didn't know that, though.
Well, that's the thing about the subconscious, right?
Right.
It's not right at the forefront.
Oh my gosh! And the funny thing is, and again, I laugh about this stuff, and this is not stuff to be taken lightly. But I've gone through so much now, and I find ways to bring lightheartedness into all of my stuff as much as possible. But I wasn't one of those people that had like forgotten about it. Some people, it's like completely disconnected, I think they call, right, disassociation or whatever. It's so repressed that you don't even remember it, and then you start to slowly get flashes of it. But for me, I always knew it, I always remembered it, but I don't know, I would always say to myself, I have this resilience around it. It's really weird. None of it really impacted me, and it just wasn't impacting me in what I considered like textbook way. It was more, like you said, hidden. And when it started to be revealed, it's pretty like mind-blowing, like I said. Were you one of those that had like forgotten it and now it's coming forward, or you always knew about it but now you were starting to actually deal with it?
Well, I knew about it. I didn't realize the effect it had on me until not too very long ago. And as I was trying to deal with how I really made a connection, let me see if I can really break this down. I started looking at certain behaviors that I was doing and seeing exactly where they came from. And once that happened, it was like Pandora's box. And it It was like, okay, I really need to address this because this is an area of my life that is causing me problems.
Mm-hmm. Yes. That's kind of like what was happening to me too, where I feel like there's certain things in relationships that each individual will do to create what I would consider like disharmony or dissonance or some type of, you know what I mean? And when I started honing in on some of these things, it was really beautiful, to be honest with you. It was like, it's also humbling, you know?
It is.
Mm-hmm.
It is. It is really amazing when we think about, all of the things that we do and things that are disabling for some are not for others. But when we start saying, why am I uncomfortable with this?
Yep.
That question is a necessary key to unlocking a better you. You've got to move forward.
This is a great point to kind of just wrap up our conversation. If I could give just one tool, one tip, it's to start with recognizing the negative self-talk and asking ourselves, like, what do I fear? What in this moment is really fearing me? Because it's, like you said, the number one way to move forward. And the only way we'll be able to really address it. It's assess, address, reveal, heal. We have to feel to heal, and we should not be afraid. And we are all in this together, and that's one of the main reasons why I did this show. And I want to thank you so much for being a part of the Sacral Circle Sisterhood. Please tell people where they can find you and support you and review your work or get in touch with your programs and stuff. So feel free to go ahead and share that with our listeners.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me. Those who are interested in learning more about me, I'd be more than happy to share any type of information that I can. My goal is to help people. So Vote Program, VOTE, program.org. They can email me. Actually, there's a link right there on the website. And so click and make that as simple as possible.
Beautiful. Thank you. And again, thank you for all the work that you're doing. And I wish you continued success on all of the future projects that you have, that you'll be rolling out. And I want to thank our beautiful listeners for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to the Sacred Stories podcast on iTunes, where you'll find other impactful, inspiring shows. And connect with me via our social media pages. You'll find us at The Sacral Circle. Your shares and likes are greatly appreciated because they help spread the love. If you have any questions about my coaching and healing services, visit my website at JanieTerrazas.com. As we say goodbye, always remember to know your worth and continue to love and value yourself wholeheartedly. Peace be with you.